Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. I didn't know if I was going to be in the office today, actually, because Boris seems to be a bit seesawing on advice. I'm just been in a meeting about what we're now going to do about with the room, whether we're out. Oh, it is like the COVID hokey cokey. But I've opted for being in the shed to do this for you today. So thank you all for attending. So it's our Accessibility and Vulnerable Services Networking event. So now we've had a few of these now, and one of the bits we're going to do today really is show you what we do with it. So what we've done with it what we've done with ones we've run previously, and how we embed it in the business, and how we've created some really useful interactions, partnerships, collaborations with some of our stakeholders to produce a really sort of good set of packages and potential packages of affordability and vulnerability support. So we're going to be going through some of that today, mainly focusing on affordability for this session this afternoon, but also touching on some of the other sort of like provision of services like bottled water during events, that kind of stuff, touching on that. But mainly we're going to be focusing on the affordability piece in this session. So yeah, so what we're really hoping to get from it is, and so I think it's always important to lay that out, is now we are hoping to share a bit of best practice. We're hoping to create some future potential collaborations. I mean, some of them you'll hear have been really, really good, and some of the ones we've been doing in the affordability area and in terms of growing some of our vulnerability registers has been pretty industry leading, and that's in no sort of short measure to the collaboration and thing we've had with our stakeholders such as yourselves. So it's really, really good and powerful. And we've also got some guest speakers, which I'll just quickly mention. So we've got Sheila Coburn from Mid-Kent Revenues and Benefits Partnership, and we've got Jess Cook from the National Energy Action, and we've got a Q&A as well with Melina Guadalupe from the Kent Kidney Patient Association. So thanks for everyone who's chipping in and helping us out with the agenda. That's great. But just to finish, I said I'll be short, but just to finish, like last year, we got everyone, I think, got the benefit out of just sort of being a bit interactive, bouncing ideas off of each other. There'll be discussion lounges, which is another term that you've only had in Zoom, and we'll get fully involved to make sure that everyone, hopefully everyone will get fully involved to make sure we get as much out of the day as we can. But thanks again for attending. It's excellent to see you all here, and I hope it's have a good session.
Thank you, Dave. I think I just need to say as well, having continued and consistent support from our exec team and our senior leadership has been an integral part of what we've been able to deliver over the last year. So it's really important to acknowledge that. I'm just going to hand over now to Andy Klaus, who is head of our customer experience and strategy team.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks, Dave. So again, I just wanted to add my welcome to everybody, which for us is a really important event. It's our third stakeholder event. I was thinking this is our second virtual one, and sort of the end of last week, I was sort of thinking, oh, it'd be really good to have done this in person again and get people together. But then as I drove through a load of snow on Sunday, I decided it probably wasn't a good idea for everybody to have got together. So lots of things conspiring. Great to see today a whole range and varied group of organisations. We've got water companies, we've got energy companies, local government, and I'm seeing local and national third sector representation. So that ensures that through these events that we get a really wide, diverse mix of knowledge and views, and that we can all share those sort of learnings and knowledge. One thing we have done over the last couple of years is develop what we call our embedded engagement strategy of how we engage with customers, with stakeholders, and with the communities generally. And one of the key things for us is that we better understand society's expectations of us as a company. And that's one of the reasons that we really set up this annual event, to ensure that we could get input from stakeholders like yourselves and get that experience. So for us, it continues to be a key aspect to ensure that that plan works for both communities and for customers alike. We first published our vulnerability strategy back in 2019, it was then called. We've had to adapt and evolve a lot over those 2 years to ensure that we provided support to more families in very, very unique circumstances that quite a lot of us never really anticipated. And we think that's helped us think a bit more innovatively about how best we deliver services for the future. And so for the last 12 months, we've really focused on horizon scanning on what that future looks like and how we then therefore reflect that into our future strategy updates. The next one is due to be published in early 2022. So once again, just from me, appreciate the time that you've all given and committed to attend this event, and look forward to you sharing your thoughts and views during the session. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy. Right, sorry, there's a bit of a delay on my ticker there. So most of you will know me. My name is Jane Crisp. I'm the Vulnerability Strategy Manager. I'm part of Andy's team, and I will be facilitating the first part of today's session before you get to hear from the guest speakers. We will be using Slido, and this is the agenda for today, which you've all had in your invites. I just want to quickly run through as well what we hope to get out of today. As well as the packed agenda, we've obviously have our keynote speakers, and I think part of today we'd already said in our agenda what we hope to get out of the session. As you will hear over the next couple of hours, we've had some key achievements in our data share, and we know there's always an opportunity to do more, working with you, engaging in gaining insight on how we best deliver services, and what your expectations are on those, and what the benefit to wider society is, by working with stakeholders to improve awareness and understanding, find a more effective ways and routes that create the conditions for things like data share. Today we're focusing on affordability, as Andy said. We can together better understand the scale and nature of water poverty while understanding the relationship with fuel poverty as well. We all know that this winter in particular is going to be very difficult for a lot of our communities and our customers. So I'm sure you're all familiar with Slido. Those of you who are not, if you open your phone and use your camera to zoom in on the QR code, I think that's the right term for it, is it? A QR code? I was wrong for 1 minute. That should take you to Slido, where you will find your first question. And that question is, in one word, what are you hoping to get out of today? For those of you who don't use Slido or don't have the right phone to use Slido, maybe you don't, then we're happy to take some of that information or your answers in chat. We prefer Slido because it means we can collate all the information and feed that through some of our insight and engagement outcomes as well. So they've started coming through now as well. Thank you. We start to build those through. So collaboration, information, shared views, insight, knowledge. So collaboration and knowledge is coming through the strongest. We've got 7 people at the moment. So if you just need a little bit more time to connect to Slido, use your camera, go onto the QR code, and that will take you through. It's quite easy to use, and we'll be using that throughout the session today. I'll give you another minute or so. Okay, I'll take it. Maybe some of you are disconnecting. Where there's some more questions, there'll be a QR code as well. So if you haven't been able to join that, then I haven't seen that any have come through on chat. It would be good if we had as much participation through Slido as possible. So, Molly, are you okay too? I'll go back and share now. Sorry. 1 second, sorry, got some. Yeah, sorry about that. We've got some bit of technical going in and out. So we've had the answers from what you would hope to get out of today. Really what I wanted to start with as well, today's session, is to say thank you for last year's event. We had a fantastic collaboration last year with lots of our partners who joined us for 3 days events, and we took some of the insight and feedback that you gave us, and we have developed some of the services and some of our, can you hold 1 second?
I think we might just have a slight technical issue that they're trying to sort out in the background. So just if you can just bear with us a second, try and get Slido working. We'll be back to you ASAP. Hi, yeah, so definitely we've got a bit of a technical issue with Jane, which means that I'm going to take over, which will be interesting, no doubt. But Jane was telling us about how the developments following last year's event, how we'd used the information, really to try and explain that. Really, you basically, the event said last time, important that when customers contact, you get access to more than just support on their water bill. So that is really trying to create a more holistic sort of solution for customers. So we've undertaken a number of key things there to try and, I suppose, implement and improve that area. So we improved updated training for our frontline teams, and trying to signpost to other organisations. One of the key things we did there was really to launch our help and support page, which is a dedicated web page where we actually actively promote other third sectors in our region, other types of service providers who can provide that additional support to customers. We've also introduced a Money Helper, the self-referral tool, and added that into all our printed material and website, as well as been looking at, we know that particularly around for customers who have effectively had some sort of bereavement, we've improved our training and sort of content for those types of customers to try and give better support. You also said, well, you wanted to make it easier for organisations who were actually trying to provide support to customers to refer either for registering on the Priority Services Register or to access one of those tariffs. So we made that quite simple by creating an online referral form for our trusted partners, and we've created and testing at the moment with Citizens Advice based at Maidstone, effectively a referral tool that will enable them to directly provide all the information that customers need to be able to sign up. If I could have the next slide, please. So as you can see, what we've effectively here is created what we call our help and support web page. And there's a few localized third sector organisations who have taken advantage of us effectively signposting customers. We've left that open, and we've effectively decided that that's going to be a regional thing. We've got national suppliers who effectively want to promote to all of our customers. And then you can see there people like Kent Fire and Rescue, Mid Kent Mind, Citizens Advice Canterbury, who effectively want to focus predominantly on very regionalised customer base. So we're trying to create almost a regional web page that would effectively then enable customers in different regions to be able to easily identify where they can get help and support beyond just their affordability tariffs or their PSR. And that's been incredibly successful so far, and organisations seem to like that. We're actively at the moment trying to promote more third sector organisations to advertise themselves on this website, just as an alternative solution for them. Next slide, please. So our vulnerability strategy has effectively focused on three key areas. The three key areas are those of affordability, which is what we're here to talk about today. We also had a supportive element, which is effectively our priority services register, how we, for example, Dave talked earlier about how we supply bottled water, for example, in the during a water outage incident, but then also accessibility, which is obviously things like access to better information, our website, all of those areas that we have. So effectively, our initiatives always fall into one of those three categories. And you'll have seen that in our vulnerability strategy that we have at the moment. Next slide, please. So as you can see, we've, for those of you that hadn't seen our 20 to 25 vulnerability strategy, this is sort of an example of how we've published what we've published. As I said, it falls into those three areas of affordability, accessibility, and supported services. And as you can see, it sort of breaks down how we basically built up that strategy. So it was based on customer insight, it was based on stakeholder insight. So for affordability of water, it told us about, that we needed to keep water affordable, that we should support more customers in financial difficulty, but also went down into more granular type activities, such as we should actively provide free sort of free phone number for customers who have particular affordability issues. Accessibility of services is about making bills really easy. One of the things we have done this year, over the last couple of years, is to actually completely redesign our bill to make them very simple. That enables customers 4 or 5 key bits of information to really help them understand what their bill is, how that's made up, and what they need to pay. And really, there's the final bit about when things go wrong, so what support we offer them. So actually proactively reaching out to customers when things have gone wrong, being registered on the Priority Services Register, and making that more of a proactive type of service design. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to talk you through a little bit about our performance overall. That's broken down into two things. We'll sort of just give you a quick view of what our targets are and the sorts of things that we measure. And I'll also then just talk to you a little bit more about the where we are to date. So as you can see, we Kate, yeah, you've just asked about sharing the bill. Very happy to share our bill. So our 20 to 25 performance commitments are focused on our Priority Services Register. So improving the reach. You see quite a big jump. We started at about 1.2% of our billed properties at the end of 2020. And our target is to have about 10.8% of customers on that PSR by the end of the year. By the end of the 25, sorry, not the year. That would be a particularly challenging target, but 25 by the end of 2025. We then also have not just about getting people on the register, but also making sure the data is accurate. So we have a commitment across the industry to make sure that we've revalidated 35% of customers every 2 years, and have attempted to have contacted at least 90% of those customers every 2 years as well. Affordability tariffs, our social tariff and Watershaw, seeing a big jump, 75,000 by the end of the 2025, 58,000 target. We also have some very specific vulnerability satisfaction scores that we measure particularly, which is customers who are having payment difficulties, have suffered a disruption of water supply, and on our Priority Services Register, or actually just on our Priority Services Register. So we have some particular targets around that. Next slide, please. So how are we doing against those? Really pleased to say that, as you can see, nearly all those targets are on green. At the moment, we have one slightly skewed amber, and that's just because we've still got a big jump to get between 48,500 customers where we are today to achieve that almost 58,000 by March 2022. So that's just a timing issue of getting customers on those schemes, but we've actually had really good sort of uptake in the last year. And you'll see, we'll talk effectively a little bit later. One of the things that we've done to achieve that is our data sharing with local councils, which Sheila Coburn will be talking about later. Our satisfaction scores are all really good. As you can see, all of our targets were usually about plus 0.2. These are out of 5 scores, so we're all really pleased to always see that we're supplying a good service to customers who need that extra support. Next slide, please. So, as you can see here, one of the things we have been trying to do as part of our strategy is to effectively create a regional dashboard around our Priority Services Register. So as well as focus on how many customers are on our register, but also try and understand more about how we should be targeting, how we should be focusing in terms of our PSR promotion. So as you can see at the moment, what we see is we have our highest area is Kent. It's also our highest patch in terms of populace, but so therefore we don't sort of focus on that number. So Kent 15,710. You'll see if you compare that to the Sussex number below, that we have about 4.8 in Kent and almost 6% in East Sussex. So we're really trying to figure out how we should promote and where we should be pushing some of our services in the area. And the regional dashboard really helps us to do that. Likewise, on the next slide, you'll also see we've done very similar things on our affordability in terms of understand where affordability sort of sits within our region. And again, we're seeing similar sorts of numbers come through in terms of links between priority services register and affordability. Kent is our highest area, but it's also our highest number of sort of customer base against connected households. So next slide, please. We're seeing a growth there that's in tracking as we expect it to be. If we continue with our PSR and our affordability growth, then we should be very, very close to our end of year targets for this year, which is really good. We'll see a bit of a step change in October, where we're starting to do in the affordability tariffs, where we're starting to see the impacts of data share starting to show through. Next slide, and the regional data dashboard, as we talked about, which we're really, really proud of, is giving us way more insight into that granular, I suppose, quite varied area that we serve and the customers within that and the needs within that customer base. And you'll start to see and understand more about how we're using that from the work that we've done in our horizon scanning moving forward as well. So partnership focus has been a key thing for us. You know, we've sort of focused on 3 key areas really. We've focused on awareness, making sure that we are effectively trying to make sure that third sector and other organisations are able to signpost. We're able to signpost to them as well. Perception, customers recognising the support is there for them. That's one of our biggest challenges at the moment, is general awareness and perception of customers about actually how many of them really want to take advantage of those tariffs. And finally, it's about working with people like yourselves in partnership about collaboration and where we have aligned objectives and how we can really sort of leverage off each other's work. Next slide, please. And just really as a bit of an example, just wanted to show you some of the people that we have been working with across the communities at the moment, in a number of different ways. And we're really hoping that after today we'll have even more brands on that slide. It'd be great to see many more slides. We've talked a little bit about horizon scanning, and what we have done is worked with statutory and non-statutory organisations, understand best practice, understand where we could do better with data sharing opportunities, just to benchmark. So really what you'll see there is, and some of these organisations talking later, we've used a lot of their data and external understanding and knowledge to really improve our horizon scanning, but also, yeah, just generally to improve our processes as well. So for those of you who are able to use Slido, I had to fly through that just because of the time we lost. So for those of you able to use your Slido piece, it's the next question is, I suppose, how do you expect us to work with others to reach more households? So we've left this a bit open. Share data is coming up. share data. If you haven't got access to Slido and you want to put it into chat, then happy to just add that to joint customer, share data, share data. Looks like we're all having the same thoughts at the moment. Share data. Share insight. Joint communications and campaigns. Yeah, a really good one. Yeah. So lots and lots. Yeah, I like the joint comms as well. Cool, that's useful, and some very same stuff coming through. Do more than just digital engagement, and I assume by that you mean more community events, direct letters to, yeah. Excellent, that's really good. Okay. So if we can move on to the next slide, we're reaching that point where we're going to have a couple of guest speakers to talk us through, but I just want to give a little bit of a background. Agree on a holistic support. I don't know if Molly, we could go back to the slides.
Hi, yeah, just really quickly jumping in here. I think there's 3 questions here at the moment. If you want, this is the second one here. So on your Slido accounts, I think the second question should just come up on your screen if you still have that up.
So what activities would you expect us to be involved in with you and others? So agreeing on holistic support, yeah. I think we could probably take sharing data as one that's consistent. Best practice sharing. Yes, we can come into organisations to talk about what support we offer, either to customers. We do community events, most water companies do. So yeah, and the final question, Molly. Who should we partner with? Now try and think about this more generically rather than saying yourself, I think is also we'd be happy to work with everyone. It's be interesting to get a sense of a theme of who you really think. DWP, yeah. If you want to put anything in chat, that's fine. Health trusts, local authorities, local support groups, yeah. Trusted statutory bodies, housing associations. Yeah, all good things. Yeah, CCGs. Brilliant, all really good ones. Cool. Great, thank you for that. So that gives us quite a few answers that we can join together for that, for those questions, and nothing really that I didn't expect, but all all useful triangulation sort of responses that enable us to make sure we're looking at the right things. So we're going to move into a little bit of getting some guest speakers now, and I suppose what we want to do really is, what you're going to see is get a couple of guest speakers now. We've got Sheila, who's going to talk to us about how we've worked together to do data share, which has been really good as an industry. It's been the first time we've ever sort of got a data share over the line between a local authority and a water company in terms of looking at affordability. And so really looking forward to Sheila. So Sheila works at Mid-Kent Revenues and Benefits. So actually, although work is for Maidstone Borough Council, also supports Tunbridge Wells Borough Council and a number of others. So I'll hand over to Sheila now for her.
Okay, thanks very much, Angie. So can people just nod if you can hear me? Yeah, great. Okay. I had to come off the call actually and then go in via Chrome, because I remembered when I went in using our Internet Explorer, I could hear people that people couldn't hear me. So I thought, oh, I better get that fixed quickly. So the project is data sharing to support community resilience and reduce water poverty. So how this started was, if you could go on to the next slide, please. So South East Water made an initial approach to Kent County Council, and then Kent County Council forwarded it on to all the local authorities in Kent, saying who can help South East Water to be better informed with some of the information that we hold. So the aim was to work in collaboration in reaching those who are impacted by COVID in the short term, but also the longer term opportunities to meet the needs of the communities we serve, where affordability and vulnerability are prevalent issues. So we set up an initial meeting in February and to look at the social tariff and the single person occupancy, and then work out how to get a data sharing agreement between us. So then we go on to what we found on the next slide. So Maidstone Borough Council, and we were only dealing with Maidstone Borough Council initially, that has nearly 22.5 single occupier households. But unfortunately, the criteria of single occupier is not the same between us as a local authority and South East Water. So there is the opportunity to develop that further. So that is something we will be looking at in the coming months. But we had 10,000 households in receipt of either council tax support or housing benefit. So housing benefit is where they get help with their rent, and council tax support is a reduction in the amount of council tax they have to pay because they're on a low income or not working. So this was something that we could easily move ahead with, and we needed to identify properties where the household income was under 16,385 to qualify for the social tariff. So what we needed to do was to set up a data sharing agreement. We use the Digital Economy Act as a legal basis for sharing, but if local authority is it's probably, you could ask every data protection officer in Kent, and they would all come up with a different view about what they could share, what they couldn't share, how they wanted it written. We had to do impact assessments. So there was quite a lot of work that had to go into sort of getting the data shared agreement from our side, certainly. Then we had to look at the method for secure transfer of names and addresses. And then we had the communication teams at both South East Water and Maidstone ready to promote. We needed to identify the number of records and then transfer the details once the system and process was ready. So the outcome, it took us over 3 months to get the data sharing agreement finalised, and that was by no means South East Water's delay. It was typical local government, I think, with people having different views on how it should be written. Then we approved the letters that were going to the customers. And then in July, the South East Water teams were prepared to receive the data. And then we did the joint press release, and we sent to South East Water the data in August. And on that data, there was over 7,000 households that would qualify for the social tariff. And there were 4,000 households that South East Water weren't aware of. So they were able to apply the social tariff for all of those automatically and write to the customers to tell them that they had a reduced bill. So that was an amount of 170 per household. And for those 4,000, that amounted to 680,000. And I think overall for the 7,000 customers, it was about 1.1 million or something. So, you know, it's a really, really big reduction for customers. So our next opportunities, so we've now sent the data for Tunbridge Wells Borough Council. The data sharing agreement was done a lot quicker. So we just needed to sort of basically copy what we've done for Maidstone and just get the data protection officer at Tunbridge Wells to sign it off. And earlier this month, we transferred nearly 4,500 records, and we've done the joint press release. So really, we're waiting to see what the outcome is of that. So, I mean, if you think about for the Maidstone project, over 50% of people weren't on the social tariff. So, you know, we're hoping to find, you know, a good amount here. I know it's not good to find that people aren't on the social tariff, but it does show that just by the sharing of the information that we've been able to do, so many people have actually benefited from it. So we're really, really happy that we've been able to do what we have, really. So I'm open to any questions. That was a very quick talk through, but basically it was such a good, it's had good publicity. Our councillors like it, customers like the fact that they haven't had to apply for this. It's all been done with them, and all been done for them, and I just think it's a win-win situation all round.
So thanks for that, Sheila. If really a couple of ways, if you've got a question and you want to put it into chat for Sheila or for myself, then do that. If you're happy to raise your hand and talk, like proper talking, we're also happy to take your question. I noticed there that Lou from Kent Kidney Care, you've got a question there.
Yes, hi. Hi, Sheila. Just a question. When you sent out, when you shared the data between your low-income customers and South East Water, were your customers given a choice whether to share it or not?
No, they weren't given a choice. What we did was we shared it, I suppose, we didn't think that any customers would be upset that we were sharing their data to give them a reduction in their water bills. What we did put was on our privacy notices on our website that we would be sharing information with South East Water.
I'm sure they wouldn't have. I'm sure it came as a lovely surprise that they could save the money, and it's great. It's just a question that I had in my head when this came up. Thank you for answering it.
Yeah, Rose from Citizens Advice at Maidstone.
Hello, Sheila.
Hi, Rose.
I was just wondering if you've mentioned housing benefit, council tax reduction, but we see a lot of clients who aren't actually getting housing benefit anymore because they've been transferred over to universal credit.
Yeah.
When they're on universal credit, it's not 100% that they're going to get council tax reduction. So I'm thinking there could still be quite a lot of clients out there who are missing out on this. So
Yeah.
that might be something to for South East Water to think about, because that's immediately what came to mind.
Yeah. what we have been doing earlier in later in October, we did some road shows and South East Water joined us on those road shows, and we've got 3 more coming up in Maidstone next week, just to try and get the message out there to people about what's available. If they're not on council tax support, you know, apply for council tax support, and South East Water are joining us at those road shows next week, so they'll be able to get the message out to people, and we've done quite a lot of publicity on it as well, as I'm sure South East Water are. So yeah, we're hoping that we can get the message out, because obviously the information that we passed over to South East Water was only from our benefit claimants, and as you say, if they haven't claimed council tax support, then yeah, they could be losing out. So yeah, it's a very good point.
Yeah, just to cover from our perspective, Rose, exactly that. We obviously what that does is massively increase our penetration of affordability tariffs in the region very quickly, and gets extra support out to people who really need it. But we know that doesn't mean that we still haven't got a big challenge on making sure there's an awareness and trying to ensure that there's other channels in place. Hence the reason we're working with Citizens Advice Maidstone for to see how we can try and support those extra customers as well. So, but it's a big step change for us as a company, which is great.
And actually, just to say, Rose, I think, I'm not sure who's coming from Citizens Advice next week, but Paul Hardy has confirmed that you guys will be there as well.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm not sure who's going to be there, because obviously he's going to be doing further risk assessments now.
Just got time for one last question. Kate from Wessex Water.
Hi, thanks, Andy. Yeah, I mean, firstly, congratulations really to both Maidstone and to yourself, South East, for being first in getting it over the line and helping 4,000 customers that wouldn't have had water support necessarily without this in place. With Bristol Water, because we work closely with them, we've got some joint customers. And I must say Bristol have done a bit more than this, which is why I'm mentioning them. They've actually tried to reach out with a couple of councils in our patch who've actually declined. It was prior to you going live, which we're trying to go back to them now that you are live with the data share to see if that might convince them. And we are talking to another council who have agreed, but to give us a very loose data, not necessarily benefits data, more just with customer consent that they're struggling. Anyway, my question was, what was it that sold Maidstone? What was it that made you reach out and work with Andy over some of the other councils within Kent County Council?
Yeah, our council is financial inclusion is very high on the agenda at Maidstone, and it's backed very much by our chief exec. We have an inclusion board which is chaired by the chief exec, and we realised how many people were really disadvantaged because of COVID, but we could see even before COVID that there were issues there. And when South East Water approached us, and we could sort of see how we could actually make a difference to a lot of people, and we said, well, this information can only benefit people, and we're only passing them the information that they haven't already got, basically, and we just thought it was a no-brainer. And as long as we could get it through the data protection side, and our data protection officer, things have changed because of COVID. You know, with the Digital Economy Act, that has made a difference, and I think it just shows that you can share the data where you're trying to reduce the burden on people, the financial spiral, that downward spiral to get themselves in, and I think that's what did it in the end, was that we're actually going to be helping people, and we had a valid reason for sharing.
Cool. I hope that helps, Kate, and we're happy to talk and support you on that. And
yeah, maybe we just need more progressive councils in our patch, who knows.
Excellent. So thank you very much for that, Sheila. Really useful, really insightful, and you know, from us at South East Water, we're really grateful that you were such a progressive council and made that help to make that happen. We've got a few Slido questions, actually. They're just going to help, again, form a little bit for some of the discussions later. So again, for those of you active on Slido, data share is an exciting opportunity. So be interested in, is your organisation looking at data sharing as a strategy? Just because it actually does provide an equal distribution of support, it is removing some of that postcode lottery. So yes, I'm hoping we're going to get a string of yeses, and so that's brilliant. Everybody's coming up with yes, as it does seem to be very much a need for a focus for all organisations to look at using data. The second question that we've got on there is, so after hearing from Sheila and understanding what data should be shared, do you feel as an organisation that you do have data to share and that there is opportunities, or from your own organisational perspective? Not suggesting that there's not going to be hurdles, and I'm not suggesting that there's not going to be lots of things that need to be overcome, but really keen to understand what the extent of that is. Ooh. Nobody seems to be answering, Molly. Here we go. Only with client permission. So we understand some organisations need to deal with explicit consent and consent type stuff. PSR data, very much a focus for the industry at the moment, and how we share data and prove that. Anything else really in terms of brilliant. So data sharing with DWP for water-short tariff. Engagement and insight, very much another part of my department, really keen on sharing insight, especially around the local region, around affordability and sort of vulnerability needs. So yeah, that's really useful. So thank you very much for that. Just one more question, I think there is. Is there one more question, Molly, about question 4 is, obviously none of us can ignore some of the things that's going on in the energy sector at the moment, and whilst water is quite an affordability issue, we know that energy is having a far bigger impact in terms of cost and for customers on prepay meters, etc. What we're really keen to understand is, with heating homes, rising fuel bills, colder weather, are you seeing that coming through in terms of concerns for customers and the community in your area? Really keen to sense to go, is that starting to become more predominant in your conversations with that customers? And also, what sort of percentage do you sort of feel that you're seeing it's becoming more of a concern for people you're talking to within the work and within your sector? I think the Slido poll has a percent, you can put a percentage in, so we recognise it's just a bit of a gut feel, but really trying to understand if that's what extent that is. Oh, and then if we can start to see the results coming through, Molly.
I can't see any coming in at the moment. I think it's having a bit of a lag today. So there we go.
50%. So that's a significant increase in, you know, high Golden Homes. Yeah, really good. Well, not really good, but you know, it's a it's an indicator of what I think we're hearing from a lot of other stakeholders. So especially for people giving advice, third sector, housing associations, anybody out there, just really getting a sense of I think we are seeing a bit of a lag, Molly, aren't we? In the 60% from the citizens' advice. Yeah, on the rise. Cool, that's great. No, that's really useful, and I'm sure there'll be a few more come through just with the lag. So at this point, we're just going to take a bit of a break for 10 minutes, if that's okay. Give you time to get a coffee, a tea, whatever you need to get you through the next bit. And when you come back, we will be hearing from Jess, who's done a really great bit of work for us on horizon scanning and affordability from National Energy Action. So if I could ask you to be back here for, I'll look at Molly to see if she's nodding. I think that's 14:40, is it? Yeah, so if we go aim for 14:40, if everybody just stays in and just turns off the camera, goes on mute, I think that's probably the best thing. And we'll see you in 10 minutes. I hope that you'll manage to grab time for I can see lots of coffee mugs and tea mugs. So yeah, I'm assuming you have all had a chance to get drinks. The next bit, we thought it'd be really good. We've been doing quite a bit of work about our horizon scanning and understanding what affordability might look like. Almost beyond that, as much as I hate to use the C word, the post-COVID position. Really important, really interesting for everybody. So I'd like to introduce Jess Cook, who works for National Energy Action and has been really integrated into the work in the water's been doing in affordability for quite a few years in a number of guises, but Jess will probably tell you more of that. So I'll hand over to Jess, and thanks very much, Jess.
Thanks, Andy, and hi everyone. I'm just gonna share my screen if you just bear with me 2 seconds. Oh, no, it won't let me do that. Sorry, Molly, thank you.
Sorry.
That's fine, it's no problem. So let me just do this now. We have just pressed that button and now I can't fix it. There we go, right. Okay, so I'm just going to do this so you can see it, because I just managed to completely mess up there, as you often do. So let me just put this over here. Okay, so hello everyone. So as Andy said, I'm Jess Cook. I'm Project Development Manager at National Energy Action, for those of you who don't know me. And we've been working on a project that looks at water poverty now for around 3 years. So our project name, the long-term name is People Living in Water Poverty and Fuel Poverty, which has been funded by Northumbrian Water, but very much for the benefit of the water industry. So it was never about their area specifically. For those of you who don't know who we are, National Energy Action is primarily a fuel poverty and energy efficiency charity. We've existed for 40 years now and are in place to try and ensure that everyone can live in a warm and safe home. So Andy mentioned some of the current external issues around energy that are causing some rather challenging circumstances for customers at the moment. That's something that we're very heavily involved in. Very interested in how this current energy crisis, the price cap rise, and various other external factors, such as things like the universal credit uplift removal, increases to national insurance levels. Very interested in how that plays an effect for customers in vulnerable circumstances. And what we've seen over our years of working in with customers in fuel poverty is that they don't struggle with one bill in isolation. We're talking about low income householders who find it very difficult to manage a large number of outgoings. That includes their water bill, and that's why we started this programme of work. Our programme is built across 4 key pillars, and I'm happy for these slides to be shared afterwards because each of these reports are hyperlinked if anybody is interested in having a look at those. Basically our overall aim is to try and eradicate water poverty by 2030, which of course is no mean feat, but we found that our work's naturally fallen into 4 areas, or which we have referred to as our programme pillars. The first is about consistent measurement. So when I first started at this work, there was no consistent measurement of water poverty across the industry, and that's something that we've been campaigning for the last couple of years. We do seem to be getting a lot closer. There seems to be some industry consensus that the measurement potentially should be a metric of 5% bill to income ratio, which means basically that if a household spends more than 5% of their disposable after housing costs income on their water, and that's their combined water bill, then they would be deemed to be in water poverty. If you look at other external data sets, such as the Joseph Rowntree minimum income standards, the budgets that are used in those instances actually correlate more to the 3% bill to income ratio. And that's something that we support, therefore. So actually, NEA would say that you're in water poverty if you spend more than 3% of your disposable income, and you'd be in severe water poverty if it was 5 or more. I always find it's worthwhile to make that clarification. There is actually a definition of water poverty in the Digital Economy Act, which is very broad, and it's about being a low-income household who cannot afford water supply or sewerage services at a reasonable cost. And so very much we're talking here about what the metric should be. How would you measure that? And in order to eradicate something, you have to have an absolute measurement. Regardless of what the measurement ends up being, though, it's important that everybody's working from a consistent basis, and we will support that work to find a consistent measure. Alongside that, the second pillar is about tailored support, and this is about understanding the support that exists. So some of that's been touched upon today, like social tariffs, for example, and how that can be tailored to a customer's individual circumstances. It's not going to be able to be done in every situation, but we need to understand that one size doesn't fit all. And so social tariffs might not be the right support for one customer, but they are for another. In that, our second paper there, which you can see, is actually about the consistency of social tariffs. And we published this in May 2020 and called for a review of social tariffs. And we're very pleased to see that later that year, DEFRA and Welsh Government commissioned the Consumer Council for Water, Ccw, to undertake a full review of affordability support in water. And I'll come on to that in a moment. Then we need to think about the third pillar, which is managing consequences. And this is where we start looking at how people maybe fall into debt, or how they implement certain coping tactics to be able to afford their water bill. And the coping tactics specifically is something that I'll touch upon on my next slide. But this was very much, we published a paper that looked at energy, water and council tax, the similarities that exist with debt guidance there, and understanding what it is that we can learn from with best practice to try and improve those situations. And that's becoming ever more needed due to the current economic climate because of COVID. And finally, the fourth pillar there is about water efficiency, and looking at how we can potentially tie affordability and efficiency together, but also tie water efficiency and energy efficiency together to make the most impact for customers. This is a slide that I just wanted to share around that coping tactics. So the third pillar about managing consequences. And in August and October, we did 2 waves of polling via YouGov and polled just over 4,000 GB adults to ask them how, if they have or would ever implement certain coping tactics to try and pay for their water bill. The results you can see here are just a snapshot of some of those. The blue bar is all adults that were polled, and the yellow is anyone who responded that they had total household income of £20,000 or less. And you can see that some of the results are quite shocking. Overall, around 10% of all households say that they're actually showering or would shower in public facilities to reduce their water bill. 41% of households with an income of less than £20,000 are bathing less often to reduce their water bill. So that could be quite substantial for some, and some of those did report that they are always doing that. 22.3% say that they would cut back on their food to pay for their water bill, and 24.5% would cut back on personal hygiene products. And so that's quite a substantial number, and they're real essential items that people are cutting back on. And some of that comes down to awareness of support. Ofwat have reported that they think awareness of support is around the 15% mark. This polling for us actually told us it was closer to the 8% mark, which suggests that people aren't aware that the support's out there. I briefly mentioned the CCW Affordability Review, and this is something that I had the privilege of being partially seconded to help lead this review. And what you can see here is a snapshot of the 10 key recommendations that came out of the review. There are 40 actions that sit underneath those. And that is something that's been worked through with a number of different pilots with different water companies across the industry at the moment, to try and see if those recommendations and actions are worth implementing. And a number have also gone through now for further development at a government level also. These recommendations range from things like data sharing, which obviously we've heard this, the first part of this session are really important, through to things like wider support and ensuring that support for debt, for example, is there, looking at how they maximise funding streams, and identification, ensuring that there's proactive support and identification there. One specifically, though, is that the recommendation to design a single social tariff is something that's been put in there. This is very much from an industry perspective. Currently, social tariffs are designed by individual companies, and so we find that there's quite a substantial range of eligibility criteria, support levels, funding actually that's in place for those customers across various different water companies. And so this recommendation really was about trying to make that something which is more consistent, which is tied to the water poverty definition of 5% to try and bring people out of water poverty, makes it easier to promote the support and therefore raise awareness, and that funding is distributed based on need and not just on how successfully a water company may conduct their willingness to pay research, for example. The idea of this recommendation is that it can develop something which becomes more sustainable in the long term, and it can be more flexible and respond to changing needs such as the COVID pandemic. And so when Andy approached me to ask about looking at this piece of work for him, we had this in mind all of the time. We knew that there was a potential that we were going to be seeing the outcome of the affordability review focus on something like this. And so when I was asked if I could look at a review of the social tariffs, we said that we would do so in 2 phases. The first would look at some general principles that we think South East Water should look to when potentially redesigning a social tariff. And then once the recommendations of the affordability review were released, we said we would do that again, but looking at the recommendation that was there around social tariffs, making sure we come up with an interim solution, because this is something that will take primary legislation to put in place and therefore isn't expected until the start of the next price control period in 2025. One of the things that I did as part of this project then was to try and understand the current affordability landscape for South East Water's area. And this chart, I just like the colours. Unfortunately, I wish they were green rather than all red. I should have maybe done it the other way around, but that would give a mixed picture. This actually shows the 12 LSOAs, so lower super output areas, in South East Water area that have an overall score on the indices of multiple deprivation of 1. So therefore, they're the lowest score that you can have. The indices, or IMD, the indices of multiple deprivation, are built on 9, I think it is, 1, 2, yeah, 9, just checking I can count, 9 deprivation domains, and that's what you can see in these columns. They range from things like income and employment to crime, and the two on the end being income deprivation affecting children and income deprivation affecting older people. And they're all given a score of 1 to 10, where 1's the lowest it can be, so therefore the most deprivation, and 10 being the highest. And you can see here the range of some of the challenges that these areas are facing. Primarily income and employment seem to be the areas that have the lowest scores in these areas. They do seem to have relatively high scores when you look at things like living environment, and for some looking at barriers to housing and services. But really, I just wanted to try and show that there's a wide range of data that's available there that might help when we're looking to try and target support to certain areas, and different campaigns or different methods of engagement could be used to try and target different groups that fall into these domains. And so we took this into account as we were thinking about how you might want to redesign South East Water's current social tariff. And so in the blue boxes in the bottom left corner there, you can see that I put forward a few ideas of how you might look to target campaigns, whether that be using the income deprivation affecting children index and maybe targeting at free school meal areas, or looking at local job centres, things like that. And that's just a few examples of how they might do that. But overall, what we wanted to try and do was we wanted to try and understand what the South East Water social tariff could potentially look like if it was redesigned within certain parameters in order to be able to try and support more customers. And those parameters are that there are currently a government level development group working on trying to get to that single social tariff. So we don't want to make it too much of a change based on the current model, because that would be changing too many times in a short time period, relatively short. And we wanted to maintain the fact that South East Water have continuously tried to design something that's simple. Their current eligibility criteria is based on an income level of £16,385, and that's basically if your household income meets that or below, then you'll qualify, and that's simple and easy for customers to understand. So keeping that model of an income threshold, we looked to try and understand how many households potentially fall into different income brackets, to see if we were to increase the income threshold, what might that look like for numbers of customers supported on South East Water's social tariff, and how would that compare to the data that exists for households in water poverty within their area. So the table at the top there shows basically how that maps across. The census household count is what we've used to get the data, the income data. So the percentages you see there are the percentages on the census count, and then they've been basically proportionally applied to South East Water. But what you can see is the bands that we have at the moment, the blue bands, are at £18,000 and £20,500. And that is because if you look at the variance columns, 5% water poverty metric and 3%, they are the levels which would map closest to solving water poverty in South East Water area at those respective measurements. So if we were to increase it to 18,000, that in theory would support just over 77,000 households in South East Water area if everybody was accessing support, which is just 1,000 shy of the 5% measure of water poverty in their area. If we increased it to 20,500, that would actually be supporting nearly 153,000, but it would be just over the 3% measure. In order to understand if either of those are doable or achievable, the bottom table there shows how much that might cost, and this is based on a number of different approaches. So currently South East Water have a split between customer zones, which is something that they inherited with their licenses when they became South East Water, and so the bill cap does slightly change based on which zone a customer's in. If we maintained that same split, you can see the cost on the first row there of that chart. And then below, you can see if we went to all customers supported at the bill cap of £123, or all customers supported at 153, and then where it would be in the middle. And you can see that those figures range quite substantially, the lowest being the current cost of support up to the highest, if it was at the £20,000 mark, supporting those 153,000 customers, it could cost up to 13 million. So they're things that South East Water should be taking into account, and that's what we've recommended within our paper, alongside these additional recommendations that have been made, split into three levels, three areas, looking at identification, support, and funding. And this, on the identification, a lot of what we've already talked about is covered in here, looking at things like data sharing, so the collaborative DWP agreement that's in place, expanding partnerships such as the one that Sheila gave an overview of with Maidstone Council, and looking at other data sharing opportunities that may exist. The other thing that was mentioned here is also the Trusted Partner Scheme, to allow organisations to be able to make pre-approved referrals. I know that's still in a pilot period, but that's something that I think has potential to really make an impact for customers. Then looking at support levels, to look at the opportunity to increase the income threshold with the analysis that we've done, to consider any additional increases that they might be able to make to try and recognise the fact that there is a number of external pressures that customers are facing, and that their income threshold currently is a before housing costs threshold. So just to try and caveat that it may be worthwhile looking to see what else can be done. And then looking at things like the level of the bill cap, and also automatic data arrangements with the sewerage companies in the area. And so we think that all of these things could make a real step change, and look forward to working with South East Water on any of these and expanding them further as we go. That's basically what I wanted to talk about. What I will say is throughout this, I feel that South East Water have made a real conscious effort to make a step change for customers in this area. And I do think that a number of their services absolutely should be applauded. And now it's just a matter of trying to see what else can be done to make that even better. So I'll hand back over to Andy and any questions.
Cool, that's great. Thanks, Jess, so much. And thanks for that kind bit at the end. It's always nice to hear. But one key thing is the report that Jess and the NEA team have pulled together is quite a big report. You've sort of taken a very highlight view there. We are going to be making the full report available to the industry and to the local partners. It's probably more relevant to local partners because it is very focused on our region, but hopefully we'll have some interesting content and data that you'll be able to use and sort of talk about internally in your own organisations. So if anybody's got any questions for Jess, same rules apply. Stick your hand up, put something in the chat.
I thought I was getting off lightly then.
Yeah, Lou from Kent Kidney Care. Oh, you're on mute, Lou.
That's fine. It's hi, I'm Lou from Kent Kidney Patients Association. Hi. I just want to know if I found the whole thing very interesting. As I'm just a volunteer with the charity, and this is my first sort of actual involvement with any company that represents and that supports our patients. I just want to know, what legally, are there any utility companies that cannot shut off supply, or are they all allowed to shut off supply if you can't pay the bill?
So water companies can't disconnect supply for non-payment. Energy companies technically can, however, they are now down to single figures as to who has been disconnected by each year, because Ofgem have made a real step change to say that that's something that should never happen. So they are working, although it's not in legislation like it is for water, they are working towards the same principle.
No, I think it's worth saying, Lou, as well, in water, we don't have any concept of a prepayment meter, or so there is no potential to, I suppose, self-disconnect. Jess will correct me what the right terminology is, but
Connect is correct. I think self-disconnection may not be there with water as it is with energy, although obviously that tends to come down to people's finances and their ability to top up their meter, or to just stop using energy to pay their bill. But with water, and that's obviously what I was hinting at with the coping strategy stuff, self-rationing can still be a problem for people who are metered, to try and reduce the amount that they use to cut their bill down.
So at the moment, I can't see any more any hands up. Just Jess, one from me, which is more about, obviously you've been looking at the single social tariff, you've worked on the Ccw Affordability Review. How hard, on a scale of 1 to 10, how hard do you think it's going to be for the industry to fix water poverty?
Yeah, so I don't think it's going to be easy. I really don't. I think we have to remember that what determines somebody being in water poverty is both their income level and also their water bill. And the only way that you can get people out of water poverty is either to increase incomes or to reduce the water bill. And so the only way we could really guarantee that people weren't in water poverty was if water bills were reduced to a level that basically wouldn't fund the networks. And that's going to be a problem that nobody's going to be able to solve. We also have to remember that these things are moving feats, and that, external pressures have substantial impacts on the levels of people that are in water poverty. And so real eradication, am I convinced it can ever happen? I'd like to think so, because technically I've been tasked with it, but I do think it's something that will always be there and we need to be mindful of. But what we need to do is we need to try and make as big an impact as possible for customers who are struggling, try and recognise who is struggling in the first place, which becomes ever harder when there are more people falling into that category, but work holistically to try and make that difference. So Andy, you mentioned earlier on about energy. If things are done from like a water and energy efficiency point of view, for example, that has a much larger impact on an overall customer's income or disposable income than it does if you just do one of those things, because you'd be addressing both the water bill and the energy bill together. So if we can do things like that, we can make a real step change for people's financial circumstances. And who knows, maybe one day we can solve water poverty. I'd like to think so, because otherwise I wouldn't be doing my job properly, I suppose. But we'll see where we get to.
And I maybe should know this, but I suppose housing costs in the Southeast is a significant issue comparatively to the rest of the country. Yeah, it is. And you do tend to see that income levels can sort of fluctuate a bit with housing costs. So you do see that the average income in the Southeast, for example, will be higher than the Northeast, where I am, but housing costs are substantially lower in the Northeast than they are in the Southeast. So often we do see that they can sort of balance out in a little way, but it is worth bearing that in mind. And that's why I think the focus is on a bill to income ratio that takes into account housing costs. So then you're reflecting the individual incomes, the housing costs that differ geographically, and also the level of the water bill, which does differ geographically too. That's great. Well, thanks very much for that, Jess. You've done quite a lot of listening. You maybe played with the Slido a little bit and answered some questions, but now's the time really we'd like everyone to get a little bit involved. So I think in your invite you chose a discussion lounge to join, one about landscape of data sharing and one about scale and nature of water poverty. So I think Molly's going to explain just how you move from here to the discussion lounges, and look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, so I believe we've got a 10-minute break now. And then when you come back, so to navigate that main page that you were on to access the main stage, if you scroll down slightly, you'll notice that there are 2 buttons. One says Discussion Lounge 1 and one says Discussion Lounge 2. I will pop the link in here as well for you, if that makes it any easier at all. Bear with me 1 second. But yeah, we'll see you back here in 10 minutes. And then if you want to leave this room and then enter the discussion lounge that you'd like to go into.
We had a bit of a discussion around what happens for people who sit outside of the criteria, might just miss it, for example, and what some of the options might be around that. And I think the kind of key message that sort of started to come through is you can't just rely on, you know, a social tariff as the mechanism for support. You need to think about all the different drivers for water poverty, and there might be high water usage, for example, due to large families, and make sure you've got a kind of lots of different options for support that are included within that package of options. One of the ones that was mentioned by NEA was around income maximisation, which is something that South East Water doesn't currently do, as far as I'm aware. Then there was some post-it notes that were put up around, you know, we had a bit of a discussion about the impact of energy prices. A few put forward that actually we're likely to see the kind of increase in wholesale prices last at least into next winter. I didn't feed this back in the session, but CSE and Sustainability First have done some analysis which suggests that in the short term, next 12 months, a sort of 24% increase in fuel poverty, which will obviously impact water prices and ability to pay water as well. Some of the comments on the post-it notes talked about the importance of choice of channels and how do we reach people who we can't reach through data sharing. So I think they were the main comments. I don't know if others want to kind of jump in if I've forgotten things that haven't been covered.
Good.
No, I can't hear any voices, so I shall finish there.
And the first group, I'm not sure who's feeding back from that group.
It's going to be me, Andy.
Oh, okay. Hi, Siobhan.
Hello. So we went through what data sources could we potentially use, and we talked about the DWP data share that 8 water companies are currently using, and it's just been signed off, and that's going okay. We talked about not just DWP, but local health authority as well, local authority data. They got a lot more data than what we know about, so that could be very useful to us. Other utilities, so we talked about the data share with energy companies would be very useful. Open banking, so we said that they potentially could be shared with customers' income would be shared on open banking. Credit rating agencies as well, they got a lot of information that we think could be useful for us. Customers, free school meals, we talked about the blue badges. So there's a whole raft of data sources that we could use. Did I miss anything off? I don't think so. We talked about, Thames talked about the fire brigade data share, and they're used proactively as well as during incidents.
Great.
Okay. We move on to number 2 question. And he said, how can we work together? So we got lots of efficiency links, both high and low users. So if we worked smarter and more collaboration across the companies and industries, we realised that, you know, there's more out there. We had Lou was very open in our discussion point about her own scenario and situation she's gone through personally. And I quite liked, I won't take Lou's credit here, but she was very open, wants to be a spokesperson. So Andy, snap her hand off for that. But she described when she first joined this session today that she was very, what's the word, not optimistic, but the very wary of the data sharing and how we could invade someone's personal space and use data. But by this whole session where we got through to now is that she realized the importance of data sharing and how as an individual we could have helped and supported her through her journey. So that was really, really nice to hear, actually. My group were very appreciative of her sharing that. And yeah, using real life experiences. Engage in all levels of communication choice, not just digital, non-digital and digital as well. Best practices, data, talk about each of us now, as probably in the water industry, have used different examples. If we come together and spoke about our best practices and what's worked for us, but actually then learn and share that so we can go on and do more in the future. Anything else I missed from my group? I think so.
That's great, thanks Siobhan. And a little note to our group, we obviously talk too much and not at speed like the other group did. So well done for that. I think Joe's going to share the slides. So quite an interesting, I suppose, segue. We've just been talking about data and sort of getting involved more and how that can really bring benefits. So just one for chat, we're not using Slido here, but we work as a company and other organisations do as well with a number of third sector partners and other partners. So we have our quarterly affordability forum. And what we're really keen to do, I suppose, is get as wide a voice into that forum as possible. So just a note in chat there, if you really would be interested in getting involved in that, it's not a big ask, it's just come along, listen, ask us some hard questions, really challenge us on what we're doing, then we're keen to get as many people involved in that as possible. Yeah, just send it through in chat and we'll capture your details and make sure that you get an invite for our next forum. That'd be great. So if you can move on to the next slide. So I was really interested by, well, both groups' output. If you can, I don't know if you move to the next slide and it's just lagging, Molly, or whether my laptop's gone to sleep, I don't know.
Technical issues, Andy. Just wait, bear with us a minute.
Here we go. So there's a bit of a perfect segue, really, I think, to open up some discussion. Now, this is going to be interesting. We've never opened the floor massively to like so many people at the same time. So this will be intriguing as to how it works, but probably best if you want to get involved in the conversation, stick your hand up and I'll keep a really close eye on who's sticking their hands up. So we thought we'd open up really following those little discussion lounges to really sort of get the group conversation working as a round table. So I'm going to start it with Lou's comment, which I thought was really interesting. She came into this session, I suppose, a little bit, with a bit of a down on data share, and I get that. I suppose I'd be interested to get the wider view of where people are on data sharing in terms of their thinking about what's acceptable, when is it going too far, what have people done, and where do you think we can go, I suppose, is the more, and I suppose, it's based on your comment, Lou, so I'm going to come to you and ask you, just to expand a little bit more on that for us.
Okay, well, it's just privacy, really, and thinking that, Big Brother's watching everything we do, and there's no such thing as privacy anymore. I think I just I don't, if you could just sort of, I think I've kind of lost the question. Was there an actual question, or you just want me to expand on what
it was just more about just trying to get where your concerns were when you
okay. My concerns were about invasion of privacy, really. Having never been in sort of the corporate world, and having, I suppose, the only sort of thing would be like my medical records out there, that kind of thing. I know it's not your medical records, but by simply just being on a DWP list saying you're registered disabled, or you're on this kind of benefit or that kind of benefit, it kind of opens the door to be, I guess, labeled. More than anything, it's labeled. You know, I personally have fought, and so do a lot of the patients that I work with, fight very hard to not be just labeled disabled or labeled, you know, kidney patient. To sort of, yes, we need help. We need help when we start out, and some of us need help for life. But a lot of us, you know, we go through stages. You know, we work, we pay our taxes, our national insurance contributions, and then we fall ill, and then we end up not being able to work, and we have all this burden. And the last thing you want to do is kind of tell your neighbors or tell the world, because you have this pride thing, and it's you're embarrassed and you're ashamed, and depression kicks in and things like that. And it was more of a always being a little bit sort of weary about who knew too much about me.
Yeah,
my patients, really. But it is like I said, I've done a complete 180 from when we first started, because I remember being in that space where I needed the help, and only having access to, I think it was at the time, I think it's ESA now, or no, I think it's Universal Credit now, but at the time I think it was incapacity benefit, and disability living allowance, that sort of thing, filling out the forms and being sort of almost treated like like you had to jump through hoops again, and be, you know, and access to all your medical records and everything. And in there, you know, you share some private things, you have some dark times, and you know, you go through phases in your medical history that you don't want to share with the world. You don't even want to share with your partner sometimes, much less the rest of the world, you know, about things that you might think of, some dark places that you went to. And it's just that kind of thing. It came from absolutely sort of thinking, you know, it's my business. I'll tell you about my business if I want to, you know, don't poke around uninvited sort of thing. And not knowing that so many people have access to my data. I was very much you know, get permission first kind of thing. But after seeing all this, and after putting myself back there where I was at my most vulnerable and at you know, at my most ill, I remembered that it's not something that I didn't have the energy to go on and look and think, okay, what else can I get? What other help is out there for me? You know, I didn't have a caseworker. I struggled with sharing a lot about what's going on. So no one even said, oh, well, have you heard about this? Or have you heard about that? Because I kept everything quite internally. But this data sharing now seems a godsend to me now. If I ever was in that position again, or the position that I see some of my patients, it would help so much to just be able to concentrate on putting one foot in front of the other, one day at a time, on getting better. Right, and rather than just having to think, where's, you know, am I going to be able to put electric on my meter? Am I going to be without, you know, electricity and that sort of thing? When I realized the benefits, it just almost came like a eureka moment. I realized what you're trying to do, and you're not trying to spy on us. You're not trying to, you know, in any way whatsoever be all in our business. You're trying to help us, and that is just. And it took this. If I hadn't have been invited to this event, I don't think I would have changed my mind. But seeing it from your point of view now, I mean, I would be telling all the patients, you know, yeah, data sharing is actually for your benefit.
No, that's great, Lou, to hear, and thank you for putting that real personal perspective on that, because that sort of really brings it to life for everybody, I think, on what we're dealing with and what we're trying to, you know, and how we are trying to protect, you know, customers and do the right thing. I know, Liv from Thames, you've been doing quite a lot. How are you finding that sort of, you know, that whole same concept from a utility perspective?
I think it's awesome to hear that, and I was in the group, and it makes it all worthwhile. I think we just need that that vote of confidence that everyone feels they can dare to share and they can move into that space. We've got a key partnership with Dementia UK for a year, and I've spoken to them three times now about sharing data, and each time it's absolutely a closed door. And I get it, I get that fear, but it's turning it round, isn't it, to for the value of sharing the data to be bigger than the risk.
Yeah, definitely. Sheila Coburn, I know you've got your hands up.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's important to realise that actually it's not any sort of sensitive or special data that's being shared. So it was purely done on a affordability issue. So we know what the criteria was for somebody to receive the social tariff, and we were able to do that and then just pass name and addresses over. So it was purely affordability. Certainly a lot of, we wouldn't share any sort of special data about anybody's disability or anything like that. That is too sensitive information. So you know, we wouldn't share that sort of information. So I think it's just important to realise that.
Yeah, I think we've got two things, because obviously what's happening, Sheila, is that for some of the companies, for example, we are starting to see, you know, a sharing of that health type data, but no more than is actually required to maybe sign up a customer on the priority services register. Or I think Zoe, you'd got your hand up.
Hi. Yeah, I mean, at Sustainability First been strong advocates of data sharing. I guess the area of data sharing, I kind of wonder if we've got enough safeguards around at the moment is the open banking data. So on the one hand, I can see that you could use open banking data to give people really tailored advice and support to help them budget and manage their finances. On the other hand, you know, I recall a conversation with an energy supplier saying it was great because they'll be able to see if customers were really able to pay but choosing not to, but, you know, and shouldn't they be paying their energy bill before they pay for their Sky TV, and it's like, who gets to make those judgments about what's actually an essential service for that person to have a decent quality of life. And I don't know if one way around it is a kind of an industry kind of code of practice around this, or whether people feel there are enough safeguards. But like I said, strong proponent. I think it's brilliant, and I think the work that South East Water have been doing is great, and I know others will be following in your footsteps. But on open banking data, do we have enough safeguards around it? I don't know. It's a question for people, really.
Yeah, that's interesting. At some point, having CC Water here, or CCW as with Janine, I don't know if CCW have a position on how far data sharing, you know, we want to push as an industry. And
yeah, I mean, I shared this with the group that I was with, that with the research that we've conducted with customers, as well as listening to the lived experiences from lots of people. I think it came quite clear that people did expect to be automatically put on support if they qualified for it, rather than the approach of having to self-identify. And we can really see that the amount of people that are self-identifying, whether it's for priority services or financial support, is much lower than the people that actually would benefit from it. And I think that's why we've been really trying to drive solutions of how we can effectively get that support to people. So obviously we've touched on the work that we're doing with the DWP, but I think we were also talking about the work from the perspective of planning and preparing for and responding to emergencies that the government's looking at the moment, and taking all the learns from the pandemic as well as what works and what doesn't work, and really looking for opportunities as to how can data be shared about the support people need. And this is what we're very clear about. We don't want, and nor do the companies, we don't want more data than is actually needed to be shared. So it's not the case of having full medical records. What companies need to know is, what are the support needs of people? So what is it that would help them? And that's what we're trying to get shared in order to be able to help people more effectively. So I think the challenges that we face is, I guess in the past with local resilience forums, if you look at those, data tends to be shared at emergencies in a way that's easiest for the people doing the sharing, and that's not right, because it needs to be shared with the right amount of data for the receiving organisation to be able to use it. So these are some of the challenges that we're in discussion around, to say, you know, if this sharing was to happen, this is exactly what's going to be needed. But it's exciting, it really is, to feel as though, like for Luke, we can actually start to give people the support they need at a time when, as you say, it's not a time when they're thinking perhaps of, all you are focusing on for some people is recovering from that situation, whether that's a health situation or a financial situation. And it's not a time when people want to be looking for other things that would come many, many months down the line. But actually, we can have an opportunity to help people at that very start when they need it the most. And I think that's where we're all trying to get to. Yeah, but it's not easy. But I think the regulators are very supportive of, we need to try to make the process as simple as possible, and that's why we're looking at all different options. I know Wessex Water are doing a pilot on simplifying application forms. What does that look like? Because, you know, as Lou's pointed out, there's so many different forms that people are presented with, and it's too much. It's too much at crisis time when they need it. So as well as data share, let's look at other options to simplify it too.
So I suppose I always like to get a little bit of controversy going. I don't know whether it will get anything going, but you know, when we look at affordability, I suppose my question is to go, who's the ultimate people who know? Is this central government actually who hold the keys to go, I can unlock that completely? You know, it's great that we're doing this stuff with Sheila as local government, but they have limitations as to what data they have and hold. Just welcome people's thoughts on, you know, what should, you know, what part and role should central government have to play in this? Janine might choose not to answer that.
Well, we're trying to make it very much a part of their remit. So.
I don't know, Jess. To be honest, because, you know, it's fantastic that you've got data share, but that's one data share, isn't it? So you're going to have a number of data shares just for South East Water, and then you have to multiply that by however many across the whole country, and that's just for water.
Yeah.
You know, it does seem like we're all going to be putting an awful lot of resource into something that could be done at a national level.
Yeah, you're right. On a plus point, Kate, we are moving through the county very rapidly. We've now got 2 and about to sign up another 2, and we only need the other 2, and we'll have Kent sort of, I won't use the term sewn up from a benefits perspective. And
it only takes one to start it off, really, and I think and then you just get the cascading effect. So you just need somebody to be brave in each county, really, and then, you know, it's just mirroring that to everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we've only got a few minutes left. I don't know, Jess, you know, as a lot of this was based on your analysis, your thoughts on some of those questions? Yeah,
I think that, and I know, like Janine's already hinted where she's trying to get to with this and making it more central. That's definitely going to be the way to hit the larger numbers when you're looking at things like benefit entitlement and stuff. But actually, I think potentially DWP do hold this information, but HMRC hold income information, and so it may not always need to be benefit entitlement, although for the most part that does stand as a reasonable proxy. I think what it would be great to see is that there's a way that we can get to automatic enrolment in the same way that Warm Home Discount's done. Don't say that Warm Home Discount is right, because at the minute the only automatic enrolment is pension credit, and actually I think there are more proxies such as universal credit, that would be probably more beneficial. And I certainly wouldn't want to get to the point where the only other people that can access it are done on a first come first served basis, which is the problem that we have with the broader group in warm home discount. But what we do have is we have a government department in BAYS that are advocating for data sharing to allow for automatic enrolment and work with DWP. So I think for us in a water industry perspective, trying to do that with DEFRA, DWP and probably HMRC would probably be the perfect mix to get that right. And that would need every water company voice advocating for that in order to be able to push it through, I'd say.
That's great. Thank you, Jess. No, that was really useful, and I don't know if you can share the slides again, Molly or Joe, whoever's doing it now. So coming into the final stages now of the session, and I was going to sort of introduce Lou, but I think we've all met Lou now because she's shared quite a lot of her own experiences and talked quite a bit, which is great. Lou is with Kent Kidney Patients Association. So that's an organisation supporting patients and families across Kent. Lou is chair of that organisation. And as you know now, she's a recipient of kidney transplant. She's a volunteer. She took over chair just before COVID. Not an interesting time to actually take over, I would imagine. We've been working with the association to look at how we can reach those kidney dialysis. We realised that there was we had a gap in our knowledge and understanding of those customers, but also looking at how we can deliver that more holistic approach of PSR and affordability. So we're going to do this different rather than as actually Lou doing a presentation to us. We're sort of going to do it a bit of an interview style, and we'll see how that goes, just as a bit of different approach. So Lou, probably guess, but tell us how you came to work with the Kidney Patients Association.
Well, I've been a kidney patient for 31 years, for over 31 years. And when I turned 40, I had, I suppose, what you call a little midlife crisis, wondering what I'd done with my life the last 40 years and what I was going to do with it the next 40 years. But what I didn't realize is that there was like an internal struggle going on with me. I was getting quite angry at life, and I always used to be the kind of person that always had to see the positive and the negative in order to get through that day. And I didn't know how bad I'd gotten, but my wife said to me, look, we need to have a little chat. You've been snapping at me for no reason whatsoever. You need to go and see somebody. And reluctantly, as someone that doesn't like to share anything about herself or admit that there's anything wrong, or I'm fine, I went to see a counsellor. The hospital recommended a renal counsellor. And we got to work through a few things, issues about not being able to really have the freedom or to have any kind of control over my life because I was so ill. Not being able to go where I wanted to go, and not being able to do what I wanted to do, or even have a career, because from the age of 15, I've been battling with this illness. So this counsellor then put me in touch with a support group. So I went to that support group, and it was a kidney patient support group. And it was the first time I came across patients that were sharing similar things to what I'd been through. And it took me a while to share that I also was going through the same thing, but it really helped me to hear that I wasn't alone. And I'd isolated myself, but I wasn't alone. And I just thought, wow, I mean, being able to talk and being able to do this, well, I credit that to saving my marriage, really. And I wanted to give something back. So I thought, okay, I've got a couple of hours free a week. I'd like to do something for this charity. And that's how it started, really. I started volunteering just 2 hours a week to do some bingo sessions with the patients on dialysis, like I used to be. As you can see the chap there hooked up to the machine. And And yeah, and then and then the chairman said, look, I'm retiring, I need someone to take over, or we're going to have to just give everything that's in our little bank account of donations to a national kidney charity, and it'll fold. And I just thought, well, look, if it folds, there's no more support group. So so I took it on, just saying, okay, I'll give it a year, see what happens, and if I can't do this, then we'll. One of the things that happens when you're in Europe for so long and you don't get to have the life experiences, you have a lot of low self-esteem. So thinking that I could actually do this was not something that I thought I could do. Basically, I just really thought, oh God, how can I be in charge of anything? I can't even look after myself, kind of thing. So so that's how it started, and I took over, and I thought, okay, I have these ideas that we can do, and COVID hit. So before I knew it, I was having to be reactive instead of proactive, and kind of just got into it. So that's how I started.
That's really interesting. So obviously, for a water company, dialysis is particularly important for us. In all water companies, especially realizing they're most clinically vulnerable if they haven't got water. So can you tell us just a little bit about dialysis? And we've all talked about it for years in the industry, probably know very little about it.
Okay, well, the dialysis is definitely very important to have access to water for, is hemodialysis, which is the one that you can see there, the chap that's hooked up to the machine there. That relies on, the way it works is your blood comes out through a line, like an IV line, goes through the machine cleans it through filters, and that needs running water constantly, and then it gets spit back into your body cleaned, and it basically does that kind of dialysis does 10% of what your kidneys normally do. So we're basically just surviving, existing, not living, just being kept alive. And a lot of the patients have this, not just at the hospital, but they choose to do this at home. And without water, they couldn't do this. So that means that they couldn't have the treatment that's keeping them alive. So water is very important to keep these type of dialysis patients alive, not just us humans for hydration. So yeah, there's another type.
Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say there's another type of dialysis, which is called peritoneal dialysis, and that relies on electricity more than water. But yeah, I mean, just to run that quickly, it works by inserting a catheter in your belly because it goes through the peritoneal lining of your stomach, and some peritoneal fluid goes in, it cleans it out, and it gets pumped out into another one, and it's the machine that pumps this, and also that can be done at home overnight. So with the dialysis, the peritoneal dialysis, the patient has to do it every night of the week for up to 8 hours, so while you sleep. So if you're on that kind of dialysis, you can kiss nights out goodbye. If you're on this kind of dialysis that I was on, and I was on this kind of dialysis for 5 years, the hemodialysis that the chap is on, that is done 3 times a week, 4 to 6 hours each time you have to be sitting on that chair. So
wow, that's quite so obviously, you're a charity. The pandemic, we know, has hit lots of the sector really hard. What plans do you have to continue to almost keep doing what you are doing, Lou?
Okay, well, when I first took over and the pandemic hit, one of the first things that we noticed was the government very kindly, for the people that needed to shield, and most of our patients needed to shield, were handing out these food parcels, and they were good. But the only problem is that when you're on dialysis, you're on a special diet, because you can't have potassium, you can't have phosphates, which is found mainly in dairy. So the government food boxes were full of potassium, tomato-based things. So we noticed that some of our patients were losing weight when they were being weighed before going on a dialysis treatment. And when I talked to some of them, it turned out that it's because they couldn't eat most of the food that was being delivered to them. So we started an initiative where we were delivering fresh food boxes that were dialysis friendly, diet friendly boxes to some of the patients that you can see there. And it was a good way to also, most of them were quite isolated, a lot of elderly patients, and it was the once a week where they got to have a little chat on the doorsteps and got a bit of interaction. So yeah, that's the main thing we focused on. And also there were some emergency appointments where they needed transport, and we, thanks to some funding from the National Lottery at the time, we were able to get a van, a KKPA van, which we then helped to transport and pick up their prescriptions for them and all those sorts of things. So we were very much, it's in a good way, I was thrown into it, because if I had time to stop and think what I was going to do, I think my low self-esteem would have absolutely stopped me from doing anything, possibly. But because it had to be quite reactive and people needed help, that's how my first year as chairman, actually the last 2 years started as chairman. Yeah. As you can see there, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I was interested by the amount of time and I suppose impact on people's lives, probably meaning that they're not able to continue in employment or very easily, and therefore that makes it quite hard from a affordability perspective. Suddenly life changing very significantly for your clients and end users.
Yes, we actually evolved. Once shielding ended, once shielding was lifted, we continued with the food boxes, because we also found out that a lot of patients had lost their jobs due to not being there anymore, due to shops closing. So we went from just helping the patients that were shielding, the isolated ones on their own with no internet, so they couldn't do online shopping, that sort of thing, to then realizing that there were patients who had lost their jobs and were waiting. There was something like a 5 to 6 week gap from their last paycheck before they received any money from income support that they were applying for. So then we then had to make the food boxes more family friendly. So then we started then supplying food boxes to families of renal patients to bridge that 5-6 week gap. So it's evolved, and the pictures you see there are from the vaccination center where we went and we took, they were working 16-hour shifts, vaccinating hundreds of patients and people, and we took specifically kidney patients, and we just took them some food because they hadn't eaten, the staff. So that's also another way that van has helped a lot.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, I was really pleased to be able to come to a sort of kidney patients community meeting last week, and that was really interesting to see all the different people there supporting the end users. And but I suppose key thing is, things are changing, things are moving forward. What do you see you're going to be doing with your patients moving forward? And more importantly, how can the people here, if they want to get involved with you and the work you do?
Okay. Well, before you got involved, Southeast Water, it was actually a bit of a worry and a concern, because we've been so reacting to the needs, and there's been absolutely no opportunities to fundraise at all because everything's been shut. We can't do the normal things. And so we went through the savings that we did have, the funds that we had as a charity, so running this almost food bank, if you want to call it, for kidney patients. And when Jane got in touch about the priority service register, and I thought it was a great idea. So I strongly supported that and tried to get you as involved with the NHS on our side as possible. And you kindly donated £5,000 to us. And I want to say a big thank you, because it's not only going to help us keep these food boxes going, but it's going to help us do welfare as well, because at the moment, we also have a lot of patients that were homeless that go on dialysis, and they get given a council flat, but it's unfurnished, and they need things like, just your simple things like chairs to sit on, a bed to sleep on, that sort of thing. So part of this donation is going to go towards welfare as well. And we also have what's called the World Transplant Games and the British Transplant Games, which is it's a type of Olympics for people that have had a transplant, not just kidney, heart, lung, liver, anything, any kind of transplant. And we actually run we're getting together a team Kent to represent us at the Transplant Games, and we're going to put Southeast Water logo on our team uniforms. And we're putting Southeast Water logo on our van, our KKP van, saying sponsored by. So we just want to say a big thank you, because you've given me room to breathe. You've given us all at the charity room to breathe, to think about what we do next, because we can, because your donation is helping us to keep going so that we can think of future fundraising ideas and what we can do now to help the patients. The difference you've made, I don't want to get so too emotional, but I'm choking up inside, because you've just absolutely were our guardian angel, coming at the right time, just when we needed you. Thank you so much.
No, that's fine. I think the whole industry tries as much as we can to support, smaller charities, smaller organisations who we recognise are really struggling in difficult times. I'm going to open it up just to see if anybody's got any questions for Lou. I think probably on the whole you've been very open with us there, Lou, and very inspirational in your talking. So I'm probably just going to close that down and say thank you very much. We appreciate your hard work.
Thank you.
That's great. So if anybody does have any questions, if you want to follow up with Lou, channel it through us. We'll put you in touch. And I'm sure Lou's got a massive network of other similar sort of organisations, even outside the region, who are doing very similar things for supporting customers who have got patients with kidney issues. So. Right, so this is the hardest bit for me, because it's now the what we've heard today piece. So you've obviously been answering lots of conversation. You've obviously been answering lots of Slidos, looking at we had the discussion groups and just general questions. So I'm going to try and very briefly summarise what I think has come out of it. I'm more than happy to be told there's more, and I'm sure the team who's been capturing loads of information in the background will also go, you missed out about 80% of that, but I will do my very best. What was really clear about everything is, there was a common theme about affordability, which was a very, very clear sea change towards data share. The need to data share and the importance of data share from organisations, across organisations. However, very much caveated awareness of there's boundaries, there's limitations to what that should be. What was interesting was really about how we can use organisations to support very much the different types of data. So, you came through and really was saying, well, there's DWP data for this type of customer. There's Department of Health and Social Care. But then also there's interesting about how the industry could maybe use open banking and credit reference agency type data to support their processes more than anything, to try and establish customers who may be struggling. And that's really interesting. And, I don't know what I'm looking at a sticky note at the moment going free school meal data. Got no idea who holds the free school meal data, but it's quite interesting to sort of go, these are things that we should really be thinking about as a company and as an industry, and just as a whole, UK piece. So looking at, I think, there was some stuff came out about non-digital, making sure that we're not just focused on a digital solution, and that we are engaging with customers in a non-digital way as well. Janine will sit there and basically go, she's the guardian of making sure as CCW that all water companies do maintain a good level of non-digital engagement, and I think we all do a pretty good job at doing that as well. There's a little bit there about things like universal credit coming through, the time it takes, you know, the impact that will have on customers, but also let's just not focus on customers who are on benefit. Jess made a really good point about there's this group of customers who maybe just tipped over the edge. They're not on benefits, they're outside our radar at the moment. You know, how do we make sure that they have the awareness and that we have the channels in place for supporting those customers? So in terms of water poverty, sorry, that was a little bit of water poverty, but really strong message coming through at the moment about linking water poverty and fuel poverty together, especially in the current environment. However long this current, you know, issue with energy continues for, it looks like we're going to have a, you know, a prolonged impact anyway that we need to deal with, and often they're the same customers. But also, how do we make sure that we are providing income maximisation type activities to support customers? And that was very much about, don't just think about social tariff, don't just think about your tariffs, but think about that more holistic solution. And definitely that's a constant theme we're hearing at the moment about, as a water company, don't just think about one thing, think about all the things you offer, plus all the things people who you can collaborate with are offering. And that's really strong. And that's not gone away in the last 3 years, but it's becoming more and more amplified, I think, from stakeholders. So I think overall, what we're going to be doing with that sort of data is to effectively, we're going to put it together. I talked about we're going to be publishing our update to our vulnerability strategy early 2022. So we're going to be putting all that horizon scanning together, and it's really good because many of the things you talked about, we've got responses and we've got thoughts and initiatives to try and move some of that forward. So that's really, really good news for us. We're not way off the mark in terms of where we think our strategy needs to move to. And we'll be sending that out, plus all the reports we've developed as part of the horizon scanning as well, so that people can really take full advantage of that insight. As well as that, what you'll have noticed, the language we've used, we've tried to avoid just talking about South East Water, because what we do want to do is essentially push this out to Ccw Water, to Ofwat, to DEFRA, all the regulators, to really try and help push, I suppose, the right action. There's quite a lot of stuff going on at the moment around data share at a government level, so it's really good timing to be getting the constant message to those types of stakeholders about the expectations of you as organisations. So we'll be capturing that and sharing that as well. So that sort of summarises where we are. We'll be sending some information out after the event and picking up with you as well on various aspects. And again, just thank you for coming. I think if you can just move the slide. So when you all joined, we asked you to, obviously there was a bit of a bribe for you to come along as well with the option of this charity donation. So we have some fancy way apparently of figuring out where the money's going to go to, which is, I believe now, is that a Slido question, Molly?
Yeah, that is. So if you want to go back onto the Slido that we were using earlier, then you should have the option to vote for which charity gets the £200 donation.
There's a really powerful thing coming through, Lou. And do you know what? I'm going to call it a day there and just go, we're going to give the £200 to you, Lou, and you're well deserved. So, okay, so again, just to finish off the day, thank you for coming, attending. Apologies, I think we've overrun a little bit, have we? No, we're all right. I obviously cut out quite a lot, so I'm good. And I'll be all right in my review at the end of year for hitting the time scale at last. And if any of you want to talk to us any more, to the team, we're really open to ongoing discussions. Even Livy's cat, who's just walked across the screen. But yeah, really look forward to talking to you more, and thank you for coming along today and sharing your thoughts and views. Really appreciate that. And thank you to everybody who spoke as well and got involved. That's great.
Thank you.
I wish you all a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.